I received a long comment that brings up a lot of common arguments about trans people. So instead of reacting to it, let's slow it down and look at how the argument actually works. Not to argue with the person, but to understand the structure behind what's being said. Because once you look at the structure, a lot of these arguments become much clearer. The first part of the argument is framed around protecting children. In context, this makes sense because it was a comment on my video about why using this argument works. As I explained in that video, that framing matters because protecting children immediately feels reasonable, responsible, and necessary. But for that argument to work the way it's being used, a few assumptions have to already be in place. That harm is happening, that the risk is clearly understood, and that the proposed solution actually reduces that harm. Those assumptions aren't examined here. They're implied. And once something is framed as protection, it becomes harder to question the reasoning behind it. The argument then shifts to a specific example, and this is a very common pattern. One case is presented, and then used to support a much broader conclusion. But a simple example, no matter how emotionally compelling, doesn't establish a general rule. It shows that something can happen, not how often it actually does happen, and not what the overall outcomes are. And it's also important to be precise about the example being used. Jazz Jennings is often brought up in these discussions as someone who supposedly regrets transitioning. But that claim does not actually reflect her current position. She has been open about challenges, including medical complications and mental health struggles. But she has not said she regrets being trans. And she continues to identify as a trans woman and advocate for trans people. So what's happening here isn't just the use of a single example. It's a misrepresentation of that example to support a broader argument. And once that happens, the conclusion starts to rest on something that isn't actually accurate. The argument then shifts again to the idea that people are being forced to think a certain way. But there's a difference between presenting information and forcing belief. Explaining a concept isn't the same as controlling someone's thoughts. And disagreement doesn't mean coercion is happening. So this reframes the conversation from discussing ideas to resisting them. There's also a claim here that no one really cares as long as things stay private. But that creates a contradiction. Because if something truly didn't matter, there wouldn't be strong reactions to it being visible. So the issue isn't absence of concern, it's where visibility is considered acceptable. The argument also includes a simplified view of sex and gender, that there are only two categories, and that people are only transitioning between those two. But this reduces a complex biological and social system into a single rigid model. And once that simplification is made, the conclusions feel more certain than the underlying reality actually supports. Finally, the argument escalates into more extreme language. And that shift is important to notice, because once the language becomes more intense, it signals that the conversation has moved away from analysis and into emotional framing. And that changes how the argument is received. So when you look at the full argument, it's not just one claim, it's a series of steps. Framing, assumptions, examples, simplifications, and each step builds on the one before it. But once you slow it down and examine each part individually, the overall conclusion becomes a lot less straightforward than it first appeared. And that's why breaking arguments down like this matters, because it shifts the focus from reacting to what's being said to understanding how it's constructed. If you liked this video and made it this far, please subscribe for more logic breakdowns and trans-related topics. You all be well, and I will see you in another video.